Hare Krishna. My name is Matsya Das. I'm a disciple of His Holiness Bhakti Vikasa Swami Maharaj. But I wasn't always Matsya Das. I was born in a Christian family in the state of North Carolina, part of the United States of America, in the Southeast. And my parents gave me a Christian name. I was raised going to church, Baptist church, and lived a very ordinary life for many years. Ordinary means ordinary American. It's very unordinary for many other people in the world, but I didn't think my life to be anything special. And I was very fortunate to be raised by very nice people. My parents were always trying to be good Christians and good parents, and they taught me to be a good person and to worship God and to live a good life from an early age. So I'm very fortunate for that. But unfortunately, as with many other American youth, whenever I became a little older and independent, I strayed from that path in a lot of ways. Became very influenced by the extremely degraded Western culture, which caused so much disturbance in my life and in my family's life. I became very unhappy from a pretty early age, actually. But things actually changed very drastically in my life whenever my older sister sustained life-threatening injuries and had a near-death experience, which shocked our whole family, shocked myself. And at that point in time, I became a little more sober in life and I began to think a little more about the true purpose of life and what happens after death and the value of human life. But unfortunately, because growing up in this degraded American culture, I didn't have much education with these things, despite going to church every Sunday, sometimes on Wednesdays too, for every single year of my whole entire childhood. I didn't have much understanding of these concepts. So I began to explore spiritual knowledge, spiritual practice, mostly through the medium of the internet, searching on the internet different things and hearing from my friends at school. They grew up in maybe different religions and had different experiences. So began to form a philosophy of life, I guess you could say. Philosophy with many misconceptions. But nonetheless, I became very attracted to living a spiritual life and became very interested in developing more knowledge about spirituality, about God, about the purpose of life. But like I said, we didn't have many facilities to learn about these things. So I began to practice different things like yoga and meditation. I was very attracted to the Eastern spiritual culture and philosophy, some aspects of Buddhism, some aspects of Hinduism. I would pick and choose different things that I liked and like that kind of make my own spiritual practice. All the while, this was done behind closed doors because it's very taboo being in a Christian family. So it was kind of a secretive thing for me, a personal thing. But nonetheless, I became very attracted to Eastern spirituality. And when the time came for me to move out of my parents' house and go to university, as an 18-year-old boy, I enrolled in one course at my university, which was about Asian religions. And before actually signing up for that course, I was doing some research about the different professors of the courses to see if that's really what I wanted to do. There's a website called ratemyprofessor.com. So I went to that website, and under this professor's profile, there were many reviews for his different classes. Professor Chang. He was a Chinese man. And in that Asian religions class, one person had written a review which said that it was a very nice class. I learned a lot about so many different Asian religions and spirituality. But Professor Chang was a little too much interested in Krishna. He was a little too much into it. I didn't really like it so much, the part of the class about Krishna. And I think, at least consciously, that was the first time that I ever even heard the word Krishna in my whole life. I went 18 years, never even heard of Krishna. So whenever I read that word, it resonated with me in a very strange way. I never heard of it before. I was surprised because I was very puffed up thinking that I was very knowledgeable about spirituality. So the first thing that I did, I Googled Krishna. And then I saw many pictures of a blue baby eating butter, playing with cows, playing a flute, dancing. And I thought, oh man, this is completely beyond my understanding. I don't even know what's going on. But it seems like if I take this course, I'll learn a little bit about it. So I signed up for that course. In that course, we learned about so many other things. But then one segment of the course was about Hinduism. And then part of the Hinduism segment was specifically about Lord Krishna. And I was very excited whenever that part came, because finally I was going to hear about this personality, which was very attractive to me. So we learned a little bit about Krishna in that class. We read a highly abridged English translation of the Bhagavad Gita. And we heard some of the pastimes of Lord Krishna. I remember one day the professor put a picture of baby Krishna eating butter on the screen of the class, and then he paused and looked at the class and said, just look how beautiful he is. Isn't it so amazing? And I remember thinking, yes, he's so beautiful and he's so amazing. And then I looked around to all my peers in the class and everybody else seemed to be completely confused. So I was thinking, what's wrong with these people? This is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. So anyways, that was my exposure to Krishna for the first time. And during that class, at the end of the class, we were asked to make a final essay. We had to write a paper about a topic of our choice. Anything from the class which stood out to us, we were allowed to write about. So I was interested in a few things, but like I said, I was very interested in Krishna. But for some reason, because I was already practicing so many other meditations and yogas and everything like that, I decided to write a paper on mantra meditation, because at that time I was chanting different mantras, like Om and other things are there. But I was chanting mantras, I was practicing mantra meditation. So I decided to write this paper on mantra meditation. At that time, I was frequently visiting one room in one of the buildings of my university, which was specifically designated as a meditation room for any student that wanted to use it. You would just sign up for a time slot, and then you get to be in there and you can meditate or whatever. So I was going there every day for an hour or two. And while I was thinking about what I was going to write for this paper, I was going there and I was thinking about it a lot while I was practicing this mantra meditation. And then one day I went in the meditation room and there was a small table in there which always had different books. They would have the Bible, the Quran, maybe the Tao Te Ching and different Buddhist books. And I would always go and check it out. I had read most of them, so I wasn't so interested usually. But one day I remember I went over there, I looked, and there was a small pamphlet titled The Introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. There was another book called Krishna Consciousness, the Topmost Yoga System. And there was a book called Chant and Be Happy, the Science of Mantra Meditation. And I saw mantra meditation. Oh, this is exactly what I need. I need sources for my paper. So I took those 3 books and I sat down right then and there in the meditation room, and I read through the introduction of Krishna Consciousness, or the introduction of Bhagavad Gita pamphlet, which is just the introduction of Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, printed in a pamphlet form. I read through that, and firstly, I was thinking, I already read the Bhagavad Gita, I probably already know all of this, but anyways, I'll go through it. But I remember thinking this is a completely different understanding of the Bhagavad Gita, which I had been taught previously. A very complete understanding. And then I flipped open the Chant and Be Happy book, which contained interviews with John Lennon and George Harrison, who were big pop stars, rock stars, people that I had heard of. I wasn't necessarily fans of them, but they were famous people. And because they were famous, I guess they're credible in some ways. So I thought, okay, this is something genuine. These very credible people, they're advocating for it. They seem to have really a favorable opinion about the teachings of this Swamiji. I couldn't even pronounce his name. I remember for many months, I just knew Srila Prabhupada as AC, and that's all I could really understand, even in his name. So, I read through that Chant and Be Happy book, and it felt like I woke up from a bad dream. It was the first time in my life where I felt like there was some genuine guidance, some genuine light in my life. Specifically, whenever I got to one of the leaflets inside of that book, or platelets inside of that book, which has the different names of God from all the different religions. It says Jehovah, Allah, Yahweh, Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada explains in that book that actually all these different names are referring to the same person. Previously, I thought all the different religions, they're worshiping different gods, and especially in Hinduism, they have so many different gods. But Srila Prabhupada bridged that gap for me and helped me understand that actually this religion that I grew up with, Christianity, and also the other religions which I was interested in, they're all actually aiming towards the same goal. And Krishna consciousness presents the most complete form of attaining that goal. So it was very clear. And I remember another thing that stood out to me was that Prabhupada introduced to me the concept of Maya. Of course, we have the devil in Christianity. You have to avoid the temptations of the devil, and the devil's always plotting to bring you astray, to turn you away from God. But it was a very vague concept. It was, even though it's ascribed to a person, it's more or less an impersonal concept, the devil. But Srila Prabhupada explained what is Maya. And for the first time in my life, I realized that I am in Maya and that I need to get out of Maya. And that's why I'm suffering. Nobody else ever told me that I was in Maya. Everybody else told me that I was doing the best thing, going to college, trying to get a job, so many, whatever, other American things that are considered success. But Srila Prabhupada told me that I was in Maya, and he gave me very clear guidance on how I can get out of Maya. So I thought that I should give this a shot because I'm really unhappy in this life. So immediately, at the end of that book, it explains very systematically what it means to practice Krishna consciousness. Chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, avoiding the 4 illicit activities, meat eating, illicit sex, gambling, and intoxication, all of which I was extremely practiced in and very active in. So I understood that I should avoid these things and I should add this chanting in my life. And it also explained about these japa beads. So I was kind of an artsy person. I went to an arts and crafts store. I bought a bunch of beads and some string, and I made a 108 mala and began to practice the mantra meditation, the chanting of Hare Krishna. And immediately it felt like for the first time in my life, everything was clear, and I was directly in the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I was in the presence of God. So it was very, very powerful, extremely life-changing, and it took over my life very quickly. I began to do a lot more research on the internet about it. I saw that this AC, Srila Prabhupada, he had so many other books. So I started to order those books on the internet, and I collected his entire library except for the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And I began to very seriously practice the chanting, gradually increasing. In the beginning, I didn't really understand the concept of chanting a number of rounds, so I would just kind of chant in my free time. And I also would still practice some of the other things that I was practicing before, but I added this Hare Krishna chanting. And I experienced very practically how effective it was, which was why I kept doing it. Anyways, the reason that I picked up these books and read them was because of that paper. So in the course of writing that paper, the tone of the paper went from some boring paper about chanting Om to the power of the Mahamantra and Krishna Bhakti and the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, all these things which I learned from Prabhupada. And I got an opportunity to present a small presentation about my project to my class, where I introduced this chanting. I remember I had one of these singing bowls, Tibetan singing bowls, and I brought it in there and I banged on it and on rhythm, and then we all chanted together in the class. And my professor was beaming with happiness. I remember he seemed very proud that one of his students was taking up this practice a little bit. And I talked to him a little bit about it, and he was somewhat of a devotee of Krishna. So that was my first association, you could say. My exposure was through that professor. And then Srila Prabhupada came in my life in the form of his books by some divine arrangement. And very early on, within the first few weeks of practicing this, I had a very profound dream, which more or less indicated that this is what I'm meant to do with my life. I remember waking up and being extremely disturbed, because if I gave my life to this, that means that I would have to no longer give my life to so many other things which I thought were important, like my family and my friends and money and power and success, the American dream. So I was extremely disturbed. So I continued to practice, but in a very secret way, while trying to maintain my material life. But it became very difficult for me. I couldn't relate anymore with any of my friends, so I stopped hanging out with my friends. I didn't have any interest in my classes anymore. I was studying computer science. Actually, I was studying data information systems, which I don't even know if it still exists. It probably got absorbed by the computer science degree. I was no longer interested at all in that. And I really just started to develop a very strong desire to meet those people who had who had taken up this process very seriously. In the back of all of Prabhupada's books, there's a list of all these temples. But unfortunately, I grew up in the middle of nowhere, and the closest temple was like 4 hours away from where I lived. So I thought, okay, anyways, Krishna arranged for me to get these books, so maybe Krishna will arrange for me to have some association. So I didn't really proactively try to search for association or go to any temple. And I went on like that for some time, about 1.5 years actually. At one point in that time, I became very discouraged because I realized that my material life was going to become practically pathetic and a failure if I took this seriously. So I put it on the back burner. I stopped chanting. I stopped reading Prabhupada's books. And then one evening I was doing some schoolwork at a coffee shop or some kind of lounge. And then some random person, a middle-aged man, came up to me and he said, I just felt drawn to come to speak with you. You have a different energy than everyone else. And I was just interested to know who you are and what are you doing in your life? And I explained to him, well, I'm just a normal guy. I'm just a student here and I'm just trying to mind my own business and do my schoolwork. And I'm also, I like meditation and yoga, and I kind of do like that. And I used to be a devotee of Krishna. I told him that. I said, I used to be a devotee of Krishna. He said, what do you mean you used to be? I was like, oh yeah, I found that it actually was destroying my life, so I'm not really going for that anymore. He was like, well, I'm actually a devotee of Hanuman. And I must say that this is just one of the tests, one of the many tests that you'll go through. You need to stick to it. And if you stick to it, I promise you, you'll become very happy. You're gonna be very happy that you did that. Or else you're gonna regret. You're gonna become old like me one day, and you're gonna regret that you didn't devote your life to this from the very beginning. So I consider that to this day, the Lord Hanuman's mercy. Somehow or other, Krishna sent this person, Hanuman, as a representative of Hanuman of all people, sent this person who kind of actually got me back on track. Still at this time, I never had met any devotees. My main guidance in Krishna consciousness was through Prabhupada's books, and I also had what I considered a very deep connection with Chaitya Guru, and I experienced in a lot of ways how Krishna would arrange in my life, how I could come closer to him in different ways. One of these examples is with this Hanuman Bhakta. So from that day, I became very, very serious again, and I started chanting a lot, and I made minimum number of rounds, which I was to chant every day. I think I started with 4, increased to 8. I was reading Prabhupada's books regularly. And then I eventually was chanting 12 rounds a day and thinking myself to be a very advanced devotee. Still haven't met any devotees. Still didn't know what an advanced devotee really looked like. And then one day, my 20th birthday was coming up. So this was about a year and a half after I got Prabhupada's books. My 20th birthday was coming up. One of my friends approached me and said, your birthday is coming up. I want to take you on a trip. You can choose wherever you want to go, and we'll go together and we'll celebrate your birthday like that. And I told him, well, I'm not so interested in going to all these tourist places. Maybe we could go camping. Maybe we could go see the nature or something. Or there's a temple in West Virginia. Why don't we go there? Why don't we visit this place? I think it's a cult. I think that they're crazy, but they practice this Krishna consciousness thing, which I'm also getting really serious into. So let's go there. And he said, okay, let's do it. So me and my friend, we drove up about 8-hour drive to New Vrindavan, which is a farm community, established during the time of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada went there. And, there's a lot of history there, which I became very familiar with by researching. And I was convinced that these people are crazy and this is a cult. So I went there with the purpose of finding out exactly how crazy these people are and how much of a cult this really is. I didn't really think that I was going to be impressed. But nonetheless, my friend and I went there. We arrived there in the evening time. It was getting dark, and I didn't know how anything worked. I didn't know where the temple was. I didn't know who to talk to. But we drove up to this parking lot that was on the top of a hill, and I just kind of wandered into this wooded area. And then there in the wooded area, there was a Shiva lingam, which had flowers, and it looked like it had been worshipped. And I was thinking, what is this? You know, I thought this was a Hare Krishna place, and here they're worshiping Lord Shiva. You know, Krishna's supreme. What is Shiva doing here? But then I also remembered what Prabhupada had taught in his books about who Lord Shiva is. And I explained to my friend that actually this is the supreme servant of Krishna, and that he's actually the protector of Krishna's dham, the protector of Krishna's place where he eternally resides. So I think what we should do is that we should find some flower and we should offer it to this Shiva lingam, and we should bow to Shiva, and we should pray to him so that we can get some mercy, so that we can have a good experience here at New Vrindavan Dham. Later on, I realized how profound that experience actually was. It just kind of seemed like a random event at that time. So we did that. And then we pitched our tents in the woods. And we spent the night, we camped out in the woods of New Vrindavan. The next morning came, we woke up bright and early. I knew that there was a program in the temple at 4:30, so we got ready. And then me and my friend were about to go, and then I thought, I'm really nervous to go in there because I don't know what to do. And I'm pretty sure that these ceremonies in the temple, they're only allowed for brahmanas. Because I had learned about the different castes and everything in this Hinduism studies and my education, my college education. I thought, I think it's actually just for brahmanas. And we're probably not even allowed to go in there. So let's just wait outside and let's just chant Hare Krishna. So we did that. We were sitting outside the temple. After Mangalarati ended, one of the devotees came out. Very surprised to see two white American boys chanting Hare Krishna, which is, I didn't know it, but it's a very rare, I didn't know it at the time, but it's a very rare occurrence to see that. So a very friendly devotee invited me inside. We took darshan of the deities. The first time I ever saw the transcendental form of the Shri Vigraha of Lord Krishna and that form of Shri Shri Radha Vrindavan Chandra installed by Srila Prabhupada. Very beautiful deities. But I remember thinking that Krishna, everything that I had heard of, Krishna is black. But this Vrindavan Chandra, he's white. You know, what is this? Krishna's supposed to be black. And I asked this devotee, what is this? Krishna's supposed to be black. Why is he white here? And he explained to me that actually Krishna manifests himself in many different forms according to his devotees' feelings towards him. And in this specific form, he's so beautiful. He's like a full moon that he's just shining so brightly that you can't even see how black he is because he's just so effulgent that he almost looks white. And I thought, okay, that's a very beautiful explanation. And then I went on to spend the whole day with this devotee, Pranata Karuna Prabhu, very merciful devotee to me. And he showed me around the New Vrindavan property. He explained to me the vision of Srila Prabhupada in establishing this farm community and establishing a community of devotees centered around worshiping Krishna and Varnashram. I was very inspired by that. He was very surprised to learn that I had read basically all of Prabhupada's books except for the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. So I knew some philosophy. So I was discussing philosophy with him, clearing up some misconceptions that I had about the organization of ISKCON and different things. And had a very, very pleasant experience there. I remember one of the things which really made a deep impression on me was whenever my friend and I attended one evening arati at Prabhupada's Palace of Gold there. And then it was ecstatic. The kirtan was completely mind-blowing. I felt like I had teleported to the spiritual world. It was full sensory, full sense gratification. There was beautiful things to see, beautiful things to smell. They were throwing water, they were throwing flour. I mean, everything. It was just completely a new experience for me and changed my life. We walked out of the palace and then one old woman was there, devotee, and she had 2 plates of prasadam. And she said, I knew that you boys were in here and I knew that you didn't know that there was prasadam being served out down at the other place. So I brought some for you. And I never even met her before. And I thought, these devotees are just so kind. This lady that I've never even met is treating me like her own son. And I feel like she's my own mother. And I just feel so happy being in association with these devotees. I don't ever want to leave. I don't ever want to do anything else with my life. These people have figured out how to live properly. And I need to be more like them. But unfortunately, I'm in school. I have a job. I have so many imaginary responsibilities. I have a life that I'm supposed to lead where I have to be successful. So I go back home. I go back to where I was living, my college town. But I kept in touch with Pranata Karuna Prabhu. And he was speaking to me on the phone every single day. I told him that I want to go to another temple, which is closer to my home here in North Carolina. It's about 4 hours away, but I'm willing to make a drive over there. I want to see what else is going on. So he told me, if you go there, you need to meet a devotee named Apurva Prabhu and his wife Kamalini Mataji. They're the most amazing devotees. If you go there and get their mercy, then you'll become ecstatic. So anyways, he put me in contact with Apurva Prabhu. I drove down there one evening. I slept in my minivan in the temple parking lot, and I went to Mangalarti in the morning. Apurva Prabhu was there, and it was very ecstatic meeting him. He invited me to his home, where he engaged me in different services. He's a very famous cook in ISKCON, so he was engaging me in helping him cook and clean. And he was teaching me about what it means to be a devotee, what this Krishna consciousness movement really is. And his wife invited me to join a daily Bhagavatam reading call. So whenever I go back to college, then I can stay in association with devotees by reading with them every single day. So I began doing that. And through that reading call, there was one other devotee named, his name at that time was Ram Chand Tulsi, but now his name is Ramdas Abhiram Prabhu. He was also in that reading call. And COVID-19, the coronavirus had just started in America, and it was a big scare. So a bunch of devotees from New York, they shifted down to Atlanta, Georgia, and they were staying in the home of Ramdas Abhiram Prabhu, who was in this reading call. And one of the days on this reading call, Kamalini Mataji, this Prabhupada disciple, she said, actually, Ram, you have a bunch of these brahmacharis there. We have this young man here who's just getting into Krishna consciousness. Why don't you put him in contact with these brahmacharis? Maybe he can come down and visit. So one of the brahmacharis got on the phone, Gopal Champu Prabhu. He's there in New York now. He got to know me a little bit, and he invited me down to visit in Atlanta. And I thought, yeah, okay, Atlanta. I wasn't interested in going into any cities because, I'm spiritual, and what business do I have going to some big city like Atlanta? So I said, okay, yeah, that sounds good, but I didn't really have any intention of going. But to my great fortune, Gopal Champu Prabhu gives my phone number to a devotee named Mahotsaha Prabhu. I think many people know Mahotsaha Prabhu. Biggest book distributor in the whole world. And he employed his potency of convincing on me over the phone. And I realized that this guy was not going to let me get away with not coming down there. So somehow he convinced me to quit my job. COVID had just started, so all of my classes got shifted to online. So he said, you have no excuse. You don't have any classes. Just come down here, spend 3 days, just be with us for 3 days, see what's going on. Who knows, you might like it. So that was my intention. I quit my job. I didn't tell anybody, and I drove down to Atlanta. I met the devotees in the park, and that was the first time that I saw devotees engaging in Sankirtan. They were chanting in the park. They were distributing books. It was a beautiful scene, and immediately I felt very attracted to that lifestyle. I met some of the devotees, and then Mahotsaha Prabhu walks up with a huge backpack on, full of books. He's holding a big stack of books. And he said, okay, you're here, come with me. And then he immediately took me, and we started walking around the park distributing books. And it was a new experience for me because I was pretty shy, and I didn't really like talking to people. I didn't think that selling things was a very spiritual thing. So I must say that in the beginning I was very confused by this whole book distribution thing. But anyways, the devotees allowed me to stay in the ashram with them. They allowed me to be there. They gave me prasadam. They took me out on Sankirtan with them for a few days. And then my intention was just to go back home. So I said, okay, I think it's time I go back home now. And they're like, why? Why do you need to go back home? And then I got school, and yeah. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't really need to go back home. And they convinced me that I didn't need to go back home, so I didn't go back home. So what started as a 3-day visit, it ended up being several months, 2 or 3 months, before I even told my parents, before I even told any of my friends. I was there. My classes were online, so I was doing my university classes in the ashram and going out distributing books. I remember one day, there was also a Harinam going on at that time. One day I went out and I thought, okay, I've been doing this book distribution, but I think today I'm going to go and sit on the mat and try this Harinam thing. So I went and I sat on the mat, and then Mahotsa Prabhu came and, what are you doing? What are you doing? Get up, grab these books and come with me. Let's go distribute books. So I knew he wasn't going to let me just sit on the mat. So he very mercifully engaged me in that service. The devotees there, which at that time, it wasn't Krishna life, but it later became Krishna life. The devotees from New York decided to stay in Atlanta. They started a project called Krishna Life. So I was very fortunate to kind of witness that from the very beginning. They allowed me to be a part of it. And they trained me in the principles of brahmacharya. They trained me in the culture of Krishna consciousness and the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And they also introduced me to my spiritual master. So it was such a life-changing experience. Anyways, I spent a few months there. I decided, okay, at this point I need to inform my parents what I'm doing. And I also need to wind up all of my other activities in the material world. So I need to go back home. I went back up to my home. I was living in a small cottage in the middle of the woods, all alone. Miserable life. I thought I was going to be happy, but it was miserable. I got all of my belongings. I got Prabhupada's books, and I put them in some boxes, and I got everything else, and then I went to a thrift store, and I donated everything that I had. And then I signed over my lease to somebody else, and then I started driving back to Atlanta. On the way back to Atlanta, I stopped at my parents' house, and I told them, I just got rid of all of my things, and I'm dropping out of university, and I'm going to join some monks living in Atlanta. At this point, they didn't know that I was even interested in this Krishna consciousness thing. I'd been living independently from them for about 2 years at that time. So I had my own life going on. But they were very, very shocked and disappointed to hear all of these things. But anyways, what can they do? I already made up my mind. So I got back in the car and I drove back down there. And that's where I remained. And for years serving there, being allowed to serve there, having the fortune of serving there, and associating with those devotees who are very sincere, serious. I went for some time doing like that. I had the opportunity to travel profusely, distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, traveling in both North America and in Europe, and of course in India. So it has really just become a life-changing experience. Actually, many people ask me, how has this Krishna consciousness changed your life? And usually how I respond to that is, actually, it didn't change my life. It gave me life, actually, because before the semblance of what you would call life, I was practically like a dead man walking. I had no purpose in life. I had no guidance. I had no real happiness, no real genuine relationship with anyone. So this Krishna consciousness, like I said, when I got Prabhupada's books, it's like I woke up from a bad dream. It brought me to reality. It gave me real life. And I consider myself very, very fortunate to have been given this opportunity. And I would like to thank all of the devotees along the way who have helped me in so many different ways. I mentioned a few names, Apurva Prabhu, Kamalini Mataji, Mahotsa Prabhu, but there are so many other devotees. My own spiritual master who very mercifully initiated me formally into this process of chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and has given me a lifelong purpose in life. So I feel very grateful to all these devotees. I request all of the devotees who are also watching this video to kindly shower me with your blessings that I may continue in this way, distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, preaching Krishna consciousness, and living a life of purpose which before I certainly didn't have. So, Hare Krishna.